Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 356, Action and Dexterity Games.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. They have quite a few different sizes of game toppers if you're interested in maybe covering a game space to make it a little more game-friendly or a little more beautified. They have tons of different mats that you can choose from, ways to customize your game topper as well. Visit their website, check them out, GameToppersLLC.com.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I am Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Logan Howard.
And I am Andy Holliday.
And this week we are discussing action and dexterity games, and games that use them as part of the regular gameplay as well. Action dexterity games often players compete using physical reflexes and coordination as a determinant of overall success. So it's not necessarily about how well you've made a choice or what you did to play. For me, the game that pops out is like Loopin Louie. I can hit that little thing to make the little guy jump, but it's not always going to work out in my favor.
Loopin Louie is a great game. Our friend Brent found this at a thrift store and brought back Loopin Louie. It was a game that I didn't play as a youth, but Loopin Louie was a lot like playing darts. We'd end game night by playing darts. Somebody would start throwing darts at the dartboard. Pretty soon, it was 3 hours later, and we're still throwing darts.
Mm-hmm.
But Loopin Louie is the same, where we put Loopin Louie out, put it on the table, and you have the little flappers that you're smacking to shoot Louie in the air to hopefully avoid him hitting your chickens.
Okay.
And you want to hit your opponent's chickens instead.
Louie is in an airplane. It's a mechanical battery operated, and this airplane just goes around the board, the end of an arm, and you tap it up into the air. Everybody has 3 chickens, and so you want to tap him so that he pops up over your chickens and hits some of your opponent's chickens and knocks them off. Great game, though. Yeah, I remember during this time when it used to come out at the end of game night all the time, that was like my favorite part of game night half of the time. It just turned into so much fun, and we ended up playing forever, like you said.
Yeah. You'd get the wind's laughs, right? Where people were laughing so hard that they weren't making noise until they'd start to breathe again. Great little game, reprinted with Loopin Chewie, which is a Star Wars version where you have Chewbacca in the Falcon and he's trying to knock down TIE fighters. Great thing, Andy, you have a 3D printer. There's a file out there that you can convert your Loopin Louie setup from a 4-player game to an 8-player Loopin Louie.
Wow, really?
So if you can find the spare parts, and then you can print the base and the arms that you can connect, and Brent has printed this 8-player Loopin Louie. It's much fun.
It's a blast. Half the time, trying to hit the airplane to get to other people's chickens, I knock my own chickens down because
Slap it too hard.
Mm-hmm.
As I slap it, I get so excited, I'm just knocking my chickens down.
This is a game that I was super excited to find on the shelf at Target not too long ago. I grabbed it, like we talked about. I had so many awesome memories of it here. I wanted to have my kids play it. So when I found it, I had to get it. And it has been very much enjoyed by my kids and a bunch of nieces and nephews.
I've never played this game.
That should be remedied like right now.
We will
come
pause
back.
the podcast, go play Loopin Louie. 3 hours later, we'll come back to finish the podcast. Maybe we'll wait till after this episode's recorded so you can experience Loopin Louie.
Sounds like fun.
Have you played Chopstick Dexterity Mega Challenge 3000?
No.
Another great game.
Same thing. It's those dexterity games. Sometimes they just get you going so bad that you're just laughing and giggling the whole time. That can be Chopstick Dexterity Mega Challenge 3000. Just saying its name.
Is a challenge in itself, yeah. So this is only a 3-player game because it's tough to get more than 3 around the bowl. You have a bowl, like a ramen bowl or a noodle bowl. Inside that noodle bowl, ramen pieces or sushi pieces. There's different colors and there's different shapes. Somebody's going to say go. Then up to 3 people are just going to be jabbing their chopsticks in there, doing their best to acquire that piece that is in the main bowl, pull it out, and place it into the smaller bowl that's in front of that player. There's a lot of interaction. People are whacking your chopsticks, so you drop it, because if it hits the table, it's got to go back into the main bowl, and the whole frenzy starts all over again.
So is it a specific piece that gets called out every round?
So it's sometimes it's a specific piece, sometimes it's a color. They have the 5 different shapes and then the 4 different colors. But then sometimes whoever comes out with the cylinder, which I want to say is a sushi, whatever their representation of the squid is, whoever has the most of those shapes in their bowl at the end of it is the victor. Sometimes it's a color. Whoever has the most green inside their bowl at the end, or sometimes it's that particular color. So then it would be the cylinder green one. Whoever gets that in their bowl at the end wins. And then you're competing over the little tokens. So whoever has the most tokens wins.
Between Logan and myself, we own 3 copies of this game. I'm not quite sure why we have 3 copies.
I know why I have 2 copies. It was SaltCon many years ago. We were playing the game and I loved it. And so I was talking about buying a copy of it. Brent won a pack with his raffle ticket that they do at the end of the night. So he won it and offered me to buy it since he already had a copy of it. So I bought his copy of it, tried to cancel mine on Amazon. It was too late, and I tried to mail it back, and I would only get like $2 back, and so now we have 3 copies, so we could like hold tournaments.
There you go. The only requirement is you need to know how to use chopsticks. Great game. Tons of fun.
One of the games that's on our list is Throw Burrito. This is a game I have not played, but
I've seen it played.
We got a Throw Burrito Extreme copy for Christmas.
The giant one?
The giant one.
Really?
Wow. Yes.
Oh, we need to have a barbecue just for that.
My kids have been itching to play this game since we got it. They've got the burritos blown up. But I'm like, nope, it's got to be outside. So they're just itching for spring so they can play Throw Burrito Extreme.
Oh, I could just imagine all the sorts of things that would break in your basement if they played it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching this getting played at SaltCon, and when it was somebody called to throw the burrito, it's usually 2 people, right? They have to grab the burrito. One person has to hit the other person. I've never played. I've only observed. But this happens, and one person throws the burrito, and they like run clear across the convention hall. I mean, like 100 yards away.
Yeah,
while this other person is chasing them down. Very humorous to watch. Throw Burrito Extreme. I'm looking forward to playing that. I think that's going to be a ton of fun.
It is. It looks like it's going to be fun. And the burritos, they're huge. They're as tall as my 11-year-old.
One that we just played over the holiday break was a game called Ice Cool. There's Ice Cool and there's Ice Cool 2. Take the box, and inside the box there are several smaller boxes. And you'll use these boxes to set up some rooms. So some of the boxes have a hole in the side. It's a 4-player game. And you have one person who is the chaser and 3 people who are runners. 3 runners are trying to get their penguins to go through 4 different doors. And if they go through these 4 different doors, they'll remove a fish of their color from above that door. Then at the end of the round, they will draw cards for the number of fishes that they've collected. The cards that they draw value from 1 to 3. The chaser's job is he's trying to hit or run into the other 3 penguins. You put your piece in the board and you flip it. There's some videos that are on this of people who have done amazing tricks by flipping these penguins. The chaser can go over the wall to hit the other penguins. The runner, you have to go through the doorway to collect the fish. This game's very simple, ton of fun. Your finger starts to hurt after a while. They're little wood penguins. Flicking these and you're hitting them with your fingernail or your fingers start to get a little sore after a while. The skill that some of these people have flipping these penguins, it's amazing to watch. Ice Cool 2, the way that the game uses the boxes, it's all very neat. Highly enjoy and recommend that game.
I knew we were going to be talking about dexterity games, and there's some games that have a dexterity element to it, even if they aren't necessarily dexterity-based game. The first game that came to my mind was Potion Explosion, which is not a dexterity game unless you have a certain teacher in that doesn't let you drop marbles or you get negative points. My goodness, the last time we played that, I dropped so many marbles. I think I dropped more marbles than anybody else.
I remember one of our side quests we were playing in City of Kings. You'll get so many more experience points if you could stack 4 of these tokens on top of each other and put a card on top of it. I'm like, really? Just 4 of these tokens? Who can't do this? And then I failed.
Yeah, I forgot about that challenge, or what was it that's caused that?
I think it was just side
Quest
quest.
card?
Yeah, it was a side quest. Okay, yeah.
But it's just like the same thing when we play Hakuona. It has different rules where you could have the deck that gets shuffled and find out when Hakuona has her turn. Or you have the little dexterity game where you're trying to stack the discs on top of each other to prevent Hakuona from going
Showing
as
up.
long as possible.
Some of those mechanics in those games, it's a nice refresher, right? I didn't even consider that in the City of Kings. Completely forgotten of that element in Hakuona as well.
There's games that include this all the time, like Mountain of Madness, that has dexterity type things like we were talking about, Escape, The Curse of the Temple, where it has alter the gameplay so it's just not you sitting around the game table. Mountain of Madness, I remember there was one of Madnesses that you can get that you're only allowed to talk if you physically stand up and turn around.
You had to face away from the table.
You had to touch somebody else's face if you wanted to talk. You can't sit down sometimes in Escape.
There's a great game. It's an older game. I can't remember the year it was released, but
Hungry Hippos?
that is definitely a dexterity game. Not the one I was talking about.
Icebreakers by Hasbro.
Also a dexterity game. Not the one I was thinking about either. But the one I'm thinking of is a game called Dragon Delta. I bought years ago to play with my daughters when they were younger. I think there's 15 islands that are on the board, and each of these islands you can put a disc on there, and that's the platform trying to move pawns across these bridges. So you put the disc down, and then you have 5 different bridges that are different lengths, and you have to span it across 2 different foundations. So you want to span it over the water to get to the islands, so that you can move your pawn from one corner to the opposite corner. You can either place a foundation, you can place a bridge, or you can move a bridge. But if you move a bridge and you cause somebody's piece to fall off, then you're penalized. Or if you go to put your bridge down and your bridge isn't long enough and it falls into the water, then you lose your turn too. That was a really good game. One of those games that provided a lot more strategy than Hungry Hippos or Icebreaker, but still involved my kids. It was simple enough to get them to play and was enjoyable. Check that out if you can find that anywhere. Dragon Delta.
Some of these dexterity-based games, the ones I've really enjoyed are the ones that are timed. So it's not just about being dexterous and trying to get things stacked up. I know we talked last week on the news episode, but Flyin Goblin, as long as everyone has goblins, you can keep shooting your goblins, and you can gain more goblins to where you have more goblins than other players. But as soon as the second to last person finishes their goblins, you get one more shot if you're the last person, even if you have 3 left. Catapulting those things it's not great or super easy to aim. And you're trying to knock down other people's totems, and the way you win is building your totem up and having it survive a round or getting 25 gems. With that being timed, it makes it a little bit more frantic. I don't know if you noticed that, Nathan, where you're trying to hurry up and shoot your goblins as quickly as possible, and you don't really have a lot of time to sit and aim.
The other thing is if you shoot your goblin, and if you overshoot the box, that goblin's lost. You don't get that until the next round. Whereas if you undershoot and you don't make it into the box at all, then you can grab that goblin and refling him. You have to have that skill to flick that goblin so that it doesn't go over the box, but goes into the box spot that you want. And like you mentioned, you win the game if you build your totem out there and it survives the end of the round. And the totem is 4 individual wood pieces, becomes a target, right?
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on doing something for them, they're focusing on trying to knock over your totem.
A game that's opposite almost than the time dexterity would be like Dungeon Drop, where it has the dexterity. You're dropping these die on the table because it's dungeon where you're collecting treasure while fighting monsters. It goes around, but you have this little string measuring device. I don't know how to describe it.
It's a retractable keychain retractor.
Yeah, you take your time to measure out what actually works.
Yeah, it's a pretty fun little game, and it does definitely use that.
Went to BGG 2019 and picked up 2 games, which were dexterity games that I have very much enjoyed. And the first one is a game that's called Junk Art. It's a 2 to 6 player game. It has different scenarios, and you're going to try to compete in 3 to however many of these exhibits, however long you want your game to last. Each of these exhibits are in different cities around the world, and each of them require, they play differently. You have a little square platform that you're stacking pieces on, and these pieces, you have one that looks like a little flower pot, ball that has a flat bottom, a barbell, a long plank, piece that has like dovetail cut out of it, all sorts of different shapes, and you're trying to stack them onto this little plastic platform and maintain them without them knocking over, and trying to outlast your opponents. As are most of these exhibits you're competing in. Sometimes you're drawing cards and you're passing the piece that your opponent is going to be placing on their sculpture. You're trying to be really mean and give your opponent the worst piece that they could use for their sculpture. But that's a really fun game. Very simple. My wife and I really enjoyed that one. Another one that also got that year was a game called Drop It. It's a 4-player game. Players each have a different color, and you're dropping this shape in between these two pieces of plastic. I think it's something like Connect 4, where you're dropping those tokens down. You have 2 pieces of clear plastic that you're dropping your shapes down, and you're going to score points depending on the threshold the uppermost part of the shape crosses. So you can go from 1, or you can get up to 8 points at the very top. The only problem is if you drop your shape in there and your shape touches the same shape, then you're not going to score anything. Or if you drop your shape in there and it is yellow, for example, and it touches another yellow piece, then you're not going to score any points for that either. You have to be careful of when you play your shapes, where you drop your shapes, to avoid touching the same shape, same color, while maximizing how high on the board your shape is. And there's some bonus shape circles in there if you can get your shape in there.
Isn't it also if you can't touch the sides?
The sides either have a shape representation or a color. If you touch the sides that have that shape or color printed on it, then you also score 0 points that time.
So not a very good solo game.
No.
You can't touch your own color.
Yep. Both those games, very simple. My wife and I have played several games of Junk Art. Played Drop It with my niece, and she thoroughly enjoyed that.
We played that with my daughter and my son as well. I brought them over here for game night. That was one that they enjoyed as well.
In fact, New Year's Eve last year, so not 2020, but New Year's Eve in 2019, there was a large group that time, and there was a table playing that game, and they played 4 hours straight.
Wow.
Yeah, it was hours upon hours.
We started at 7 o'clock, and they started playing that at 8, and that was the only thing they played. And they play straight through till midnight.
Funny, that's kind of been a common theme tonight with dexterity games, is they don't seem to get old. It's one of those things that you can play over and over and over again and just have a lot of fun.
That's kind of funny. We brought up darts, and darts is totally a dexterity game.
Sure. Yeah.
Totally applicable. I meant to bring that up.
So one of the games is Flick 'em Up. The only version I've seen is Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter. It's interesting how it's set up. These little houses and businesses set up, and they have zombies that are set up. The whole thing is you're flicking this little disc around to represent your character moving from one place to the other while avoiding the creatures or fighting them. You have to hit them. And I've only played it one time with Brent, I think last year at New Year's Eve. And it was really interesting just because to be able to see a re-implementation of Dead of Winter where they try to make it more accessible, I assume. It seemed more neat than it was actually sitting and playing it. I like simpler dexterity games.
Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter is based on Flick 'em Up, which is set in a western town. Kind of a standoff at
The OK Corral.
more of a meet you in the town square and draw kind of game. Flick 'em Up, you're trying to shoot your opponents. You can hide in buildings and behind buildings. There's trees and bushes. But Flick 'em Up Dead of Winter was a great way to re-implement that with the zombie theme, which I thought was really good. So a different game is Fuse, which is a dice rolling game. Cooperative game. It has a timer, 10-minute game. There's 3 stacks of cards that you need to deplete that stack to get down to defuse the bomb. And it's great. You have this app that will go through, and you can have the app that will just run through the timer, or you have the app that the narrator will berate you and tell you how terrible you're doing, tell you you're running out of time, which I think is kind of fun. Several of these different fuse cards that you have to defuse using dice. So you're going to roll the dice. You have to match a certain number or a certain pip value. Several of these you have to stack a tower of 4 dice. You have to stack them in order. Very simple game. Played it several times. Andy, Dave, I don't think either of you have played it. Logan and I have played it several times. Played it at AssaultCon, where I think I was introduced to it. But Fuse is another great dexterity game.
I can't believe we've talked about all these old games like that we had growing up and nobody mentioned Operation.
That just brings back a lot of bad memories.
Not for me. I never got to play it.
That's not a bad memory.
No, I just always had so much excitement. I'm a positive guy, not a pessimist. So I look at the excitement rather than the letdown.
So what you're saying is Christmas 2021, we all need to pitch in and
we
buy you a
we
copy
actually
of
own it
Operation.
now. And I've still never played it.
And so it's just as good as when he was a kid.
You're right.
I hated that game. I don't know why.
I loved that game.
Did you?
Oh, I did. We even had the Incredible Hulk version of it.
Ooh.
There you go.
Yeah, it was something else. I
Nice.
loved that game.
Going back a little bit, talking about Flick 'em Up, there's a game called Pitch Car. I don't think any of you guys have played that.
Mm-mm.
Nope.
Pitch Car is a very, very elaborate game. At BGG Con, you have a room that is set aside for Pitch Car. And there'll be 8, maybe even more tables put together to hold this pitch car track. Each player is going to take their car, which is essentially this round disc, and they will flick that card, and it's a race. Go through, and there's going to be curves, there's going to be turns, there's several obstacles that you have to go through. It's a fun game to watch. I've actually never played. It's just one that I've observed.
Like Dave with Operation.
Kind of like Dave with Operation, yeah. I guess I was positive, too, because I wasn't bummed out that I never got to play it, but it was very enjoyable to watch. Game that's kind of been around for a while is amazed me the amount of money that people will spend on this game. Crokinole. You have this wooden board that has a hole in the middle, and it has pegs that are placed around the board, and you have another puck that you are trying to flick, and you're trying to get your puck to go through the hole in the center of the board while your opponent is trying to do the same thing. I've never played it, but you might have multiple pucks that you're trying to get in there. The thing that amazes me about this is people will spend hundreds of dollars on their Crokinole board, artwork on the top of it, and this is something that several people will mount this Crokinole board on their wall. Use it as a piece of decorative art. Pull it down and play it, and then when they're done playing, they'll remount it to the wall. It's very interesting to see the diversity that people have used to personalize their Crokinole boards. Some of them will put their Buffalo Bills logo on there. Some people will put their favorite sports team or product brand on there. It's very interesting, the work that people will put into these boards.
Well, there's a way to store your games. Make them art.
Right?
Yeah.
Make them art so you don't have to put them away.
Yeah, you just put them on the wall. And it's ready to go. You just pull them off the wall and you're ready to play. I like it.
Brent always wanted to, when we finished Pandemic, hey, look at me, squeezing in Pandemic into here. When we completed Pandemic Legacy Season 1, he wanted to make kind of like a shadow box with the board to show it in its final state, to attach it to the wall as a piece of art there.
That would be so embarrassing with our version of Season 1 with the stickers, how poorly you guys put all the stickers on.
You mean how amazing and how abstract it was?
That would burn.
It was like a
Super
Van Gogh,
embarrassing.
That is interesting. That brings up a very interesting fact, Dave. Have you ever been to a museum?
Have you ever seen just art?
I don't consider it art if it's not done right.
So he only likes art as it's straightly drawn lines next to each other?
Your description of some of these reminded me of a game that I loved growing up. We didn't get to play it very often. I don't know if my parents hid the game to keep it out of our hands or what. We never got to do it much, but it's carom. It's kind of like finger pool, basically. It's on a square wooden board with 4 corner pockets. You have a striker, and you have white discs and black discs, and you got to get all yours in before your opponent. And I used to really enjoy that. I loved that game. I don't know exactly what happened, why we never really got to play it. When my parents moved out of the house just a year ago, we found their old copy of it, and I was so excited, but then when we turned it over, it was like covered in mold, so we had to get rid of it. And that's one that I've seen you can buy, but for a lot of money. Kind of like Crokinole, that one necessarily going to be cheap.
Dave's parents were doing Andy's version of therapy with Dave since he was a little kid. They found something that he loved and did not give it to him. It's like Andy teaching us about how it was better to put stickers on wrong and watch Dave go,
At least you admit that it was wrong.
Wow.
You did get me there.
Well played.
When we play Gloomhaven and I put the stickers on and you never see that side of the board, it's not as much fun.
I'm so glad that I don't sit by you in Gloomhaven.
Each year, I guess 3 times a year when SaltCon was a thing, before pandemic was a thing, SaltCon has this huge dexterity area,
Mm-hmm.
which I always do my best to avoid because it's very loud. A lot of these are wooden pieces that are banging and clanging against each other, stuff getting knocked down. And they put it in the lobby usually, which is all tile, nice smooth wood walls, so that sound reverberates and is very loud. But it gets a lot of attention. Young kids thrive on these dexterity games. Even going to BGG Con, there's a huge dexterity area there. There's a lot less younger kids at BGG Con, but that area is still almost just as busy at BGG Con as it is at SaltCon. A lot of people thrive on these games, right? We've talked about having immense amount of fun with Mega Dexterity Chopsticks Challenge 3000, Loopin Louie, even darts, where these quick games tend to get played over and over and over again in a single sitting or single session, a single game night. Dexterity games, huge market for them, right? And as we talk about them, there's obviously a market for them for us, because we have several of these and have played several of these. That is our episode. There's several that we missed. There's an immense amount that we missed.
Some that deserves a real quick plug. For Andy, they qualify as dexterity games. Anything with dice, because he's really, really good with dice.
Yeah.
So I think you'd probably consider them dexterity.
That's more of a challenge game for him.
Like Chopsticks Dexterity Mega Challenge 3000. Any game with a D6, Andy is all about.
It takes a special skill to be that bad at rolling dice.
And the
That's
game
true.
knows, like, what is a good roll. It could be, hey, roll a 6, and he'll never roll it.
Thank you.
It could be like, roll a 1, and he never rolls it in that game.
It's kind of funny because we play a lot of dice games. Dave loves to, air quote, charge his dice, where he will put them on, like, the 6, so that the 6 is facing up, gaining good karma so that he can roll better. Anybody who has any lick of intelligence knows that that doesn't do diddly.
Little do you know, my friend.
It goes back to those idiosyncrasies that we have, that Andy thinks D6 hate him, and Dave thinks that putting your D6 or any die with the highest number up is charging it, making
At
a
least
difference.
Andy has some evidence.
It's true. Logan thinks putting dice in the freezer to punish them when they don't do well.
It's the same thing like when I kill a spider and I leave it on the wall. It's a symbol to all the other spiders that come to the area of, behold the dangers of coming into this space.
These dexterity games have a niche. I would say almost everybody's collection. Not everybody. I mean, there's people, right, that they don't work for. And there's people that just don't have any desire for it.
Well, I think that's a beauty part of it, young and old. There is usually a dexterity game out there. Most of the ones I've played were played when I was a young kid. But the ones I've played as an adult have been equally fun. I've had just as much fun as I had with the ones that I played when I was a child.
And I think a lot of it is that they take the simplicity of doing those simple dexterity games, but they complicate simple fashion that it makes it fun.
Yeah, chopsticks. Using chopsticks is great, but when you start putting everybody in a frenzy trying to pull out a single piece out of a bowl, that excitement and that hilarity multiplies immensely.
I can't see how that game would ever end.
You'd actually be really surprised because it's like out of nowhere because people were distracted and then all of a sudden Nathan comes up and just out in the middle of everybody fighting over everything just comes out with a piece and puts it in his bowl. And it's so elegant sometimes as you see it, like, how did nobody stop that?
At the same time, you'll have somebody who's practically jumping across the table to knock it out of another person's grasp. We'll need to play that one after this episode too, Andy. Several fun dexterity games. Let us know which excite you the most, which dexterity games that we missed that bring you great joy. That's dexterity games.
Until next time,
We'll see you at the game table.
throw in the burrito.